What happened to someone you know that made them die young? Story 1. My girlfriend probably would have been my wife. Breast cancer. Stage 4, diagnosed at 26. First doctor told her it was just a cyst. Second doctor too. I felt it. I'm not a doctor. Dead by 28. I'll never forgive myself. I'm not sure how all medical professionals failed her, there might have been time. Story 2. I remember being a teenager and thinking about how much must have to go wrong for someone to do that to themselves and their family. Then when I was 24 I tried to take my own life, despite having a good support network and literally nothing wrong in my life. People don't really talk about the days/weeks/months that follow, watching my parents consoling each other, the look on my great boss's face when I told him the following Monday, the awkwardness of watching TV/films that broached the subject of suicide, explaining to my fiancé why I can't get life insurance. It's been almost a decade and I feel like that 24 years old was a complete stranger. I'll never underestimate the complexity of the human brain, and I'll never just shrug off even the slightest hint that someone I know may be suffering. Story 3. When we both were 10, my best friend was crushed to death by the garbage truck that served our neighborhood. The men who worked on the truck used to let us kids ride on the back step and the side running board like they did, and one day my friend tried to jump onto the side running board just as the truck started moving, and he slipped and went under the back wheels. His last words were to ask his friends there not to tell his mom because she'd be sad. Story 4. A cousin of mine thought he took a Molly, but it was really fentanyl. He obviously overdosed, he was only 27. I've done my fair share of partying, and thought I could always handle my own. But that shook me, because he was just at a party having a good time and our ages we think we're invincible, and that wouldn't happen to us. You only hear that in the news. Yet it did, and he's gone. I haven't touched a party drug since. Story 5. There was this sweet and lovely 21 years old girl in our group of friends that unfortunately died during an operation. She learned that she has a brain tumor that needed to be dealt with, but sadly, something went wrong and she died 2 weeks ago. That was such a shock to everyone because she was normally messaging us, and then 2 hours later we got a message from her sister that she didn't make it. Everyone was so quiet and sad. Some even got a day off from work. The worst in all this is that she wrote a private letter to each of us as a final goodbye in case something happens. Reading it feels like she's talking to me beyond the world and I can't respond. This fucking sucks. Miss you, Taya, hope you're doing okay up there. Story 6. I knew someone, a kid who was short but oddly strong for his size. He was a bully and a troublemaker. I personally never had issues with him. He was a distant cousin of mine and I was 6 feet 3 inches aged 15. He bullied/beat up someone on a bus. I guess this happened more than once. One day, the older brother of the bullied kid approached him and stabbed him with a knife. He bled to death, screaming, "Mom." He was 15. This was almost 30 years ago. Story 7. A really well-loved girl from my high school went off to college, joined a sorority. The following spring, on the day of a really heavy snow, she and 4 friends got in her car and drove up the interstate for a sorority event. She was speeding, spun off the side of the road, rolled her car, and killed herself plus 2 passengers. You got to slow it down in rain/snow on the highway cause she was doing 10 over plus snow plus downhill slope on the road meant she died at 18 with a whole hell of a lot of life in front of her. Story 8. Suicide. My best friend since diapers took his life hours after talking to me. He was seeming fine and making plans to have coffee and talk when I got back into town in 2 months. It was so unexpected and painful when I received the phone call from his sister. That was back in October of 2019. It's still hard. Story 9. In 2005 my boyfriend in high school, Jake. He was 16, I was 15, was moving across country from California to Florida with his family. His mom in the moving truck with his stepdad and little brother, and he was in his family's 1999 Ford Explorer driving with his best friend in the front seat and his little sister in the back seat following the moving truck. The car just randomly flipped somewhere in New Mexico multiple times and he wasn't wearing his seatbelt, so he flew out. His sister was ejected as well, but she survived. She was sleeping in the back seat at the time, and his best friend in the front was in the passenger seat in a seatbelt and fully recovered also and stayed in the vehicle but was obviously injured. His poor mom saw the whole thing from the mirrors of the truck. It was awful. Story 10. My cousin choked on a piece of meat during lunch. She told her mom she wasn't feeling well and needed to lie down. Her mom checked on her a few hours later, only to find that she was gone. A few years later, her younger brother died of an illness. 2 years after that, her dad died of complications from uncontrolled diabetes. My heart is broken for my aunt, who lost 2 out of her 3 children and husband within a span of a few years. Story 11. My ex-boyfriend liked to live fast. He was 21 and I was 18 when we dated. About 9 months after we broke up, he took a corner too fast on his motorcycle and hit a fence. And by too fast I mean he hit the fence going 120 miles per hour. He died at the scene. I'm 32 now and I still miss him dearly. Hey everyone. If you're loving the content, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more awesome videos. Also, make sure to click the bell icon so you'll never miss an update. Your support means the world to me. Thanks so much, and now, let's dive back into the stories. Story 12. In the 1990s, my brother was a violent juvenile felon. He had violently assaulted multiple people. After multiple probation/alternative sentencing programs that he did well in, boot camp, Outward Bound, etc., he was about to turn 18 when he caught another assault charge, the worst yet, for which they sentenced him to 2 years in kid prison, aka juvenile detention. He spent several months there. They decided that they should release him back into the community. Our community didn't want him, so they released him into a community an hour away. They put him in a house run by a pastor and his wife who took in wayward youths needing guidance. He was supposed to be on strict conditions because he was technically on parole. He wasn't to leave town and had a curfew that the pastor and his wife were supposed to hold him to as part of their contract with the state, among other things. They thought they knew better. My brother was really successful in the alternative sentencing programs because he was good at doing those little things that people think signals meeting the goals of the program. He did his chores. He made his bed. He encouraged others to do the same. He did the same thing in the halfway house and also went to church because he was a devout Christian. The pastor and his wife looked at him doing all those little things as well as going to church and concluded that he was rehabilitated and didn't need to follow the rules. He also met a girl at church and began a relationship with her. She was a good Christian girl and a good influence, so they began letting him break the rules the parole board set up to keep him under pretty strict supervision. Over the summer, 3 things happened. 1, they dated. 2, the pastor and his wife let the parole rules go so they could develop their relationship. 3, they began looking into early release from parole. At the end of the summer, she broke up with him. He was madly in love with her, but she considered it a summer fling before college. Additionally, he had shown some controlling and abusive behavior, things today we'd call red flags, and she wanted no part of that. He was heartbroken and fought to get her back, but she'd moved 8 hours away to her university. In the meantime, despite the pastor, his wife, and their congregation knowing my brother for less than 5 months, they thought he was cured of any violent tendencies because, again, he made his bed and went to church. They advocated to the state for early parole and it was granted. He left the halfway house and moved in with 3 of the men whom he'd met at church. 2 weeks later, all 4 were dead. One night, after weeks of trying to win back his ex, he murdered his 3 roommates, then drove to her university. He got there in the early morning, got inside her dorm building, shot her in the foot, and then spent the next several hours holding her and her dorm mates hostage. He was brought down by a sniper bullet and was the last casualty. His actions are his own, but the pastor and his wife had no business housing youth offenders. Their naivety cost 4 people their lives and several families a ton of trauma. Story 13. He got sick and was prescribed a corticosteroid. As far as anyone knows, he took it as prescribed, had a severe allergic reaction to it, and his parents found him unresponsive in his room. I don't know if he had never taken corticosteroids before or if the allergy developed/worsened over time, but that prescription killed him at 19. We rode the bus to school together, we played paintball together on Thursday nights, and he would loan me CDs so we could discuss music. He was a grade ahead, but he kept in touch with me and some other friends after he graduated. He heard that a girl in my grade didn't have a prom date, so he asked her to prom just because he was a stand-up guy. She said yes, and they had a good time. 2 months after prom, she and I sobbed and held each other at the funeral.
Thank you all for watching, and don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe.